Greetings and welcome to the first episode of Business Building Blocks Entrepreneurs Edition. We are very excited to have you join us in this streamcast, a series of episodes designed to inspire and empower entrepreneurship and navigate the unknown and build a better future. Our streamcast, brings together recognized personalities within the field of business, but mostly within the field of change. Our aim is to provide a platform for industry leaders to discuss, explore innovative ideas, strategies, and trends in the modern business world, creating a community of like-minded people who can learn from each other, grow together, and build something new. So sit back, relax, enjoy, and feel inspired. By my side, my colleague from Nova Legal, Diogo Peixoto, and today for our first episode on this streamcast, I'm very proud to announce Pascal Finette. The team will be AI, who will lead the business of tomorrow. And we are very grateful to have Pascal with us. And thank you, Pascal, for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me. And especially thanking so much. What an honor to be on your inaugural episode. So thank you. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Yes, of course. Pascal, you don't exactly need an introduction or presentation, I would say, but a few highlights, Diogo, here, if you want to jump in.
Sure, Rui. Thanks. Hi, Pascal. Hope you're doing well. So, from founding technology startups to holding leadership positions in industry giants such as Google, Mozilla, and eBay, all the way to being a consultant, a mentor, and a coach for entrepreneurs and business leaders that you help to build what matters and transform their organizations. You have been doing basically everything. So I'm quite sure you will say you're in the beginning only, but it's quite a career and quite an achievements you've made so far. So also as a founder of the Be Radical advisory firm and the Theoretic, amazing podcasts and newsletter that you launch every week. You have been a driving force in exponential business and technology, and recently you also launched an amazing book called Disrupt Disruption that we have with us today and advise everyone to read. So we'll talk about it in a minute. But besides all of this, you're also a climber and a true adventurer, and you returned from Patagonia recently, right? I believe that was an amazing experience. Can you tell us a little bit about that first?
Yeah, absolutely. That was an amazing experience, particularly. First of all, thank you so much for the bombastic introduction. I hope I can live up to that hype. But Patagonia was incredible because that was a trip I did with my 81-year-old dad. So that in itself was an adventure. And then add Patagonia on top of it. It was truly, one of those things you have to do in life, I think.
Yes, I'm going to add that to my wish list, no doubt about that. So, thank you, Pascal. We are thrilled to have you with us today. And we'll start with your book. So, I will start even with your title, Disrupt Disruption. What do you mean by that? What was behind the thinking and the goals of your book and your title? What do you mean, and what are your intentions behind this title?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the short version is that I feel... And I think we can all agree on, like, the word disruption is very overused. It's being thrown around everywhere. It's used synonymously for innovation and transformation, and disruption is all kind of like the same thing. And a couple years ago, I met a gentleman called Andy Billings, who's at Electronic Arts, the game maker. And he mentioned to me that when we talked about how did Electronic Arts, a company which has stayed relevant in a extremely fast-moving market, computer and console games, for more than 40 years. And we had this informal exchange of ideas on how do you stay relevant in these markets. And he basically ended our conversation with an interesting point. He said, the challenge is when you talk about innovation and disruption, and you talk to the people on the front lines, the people who are actually doing the work, it doesn't look like anything they write about in the books. And I took that as a little bit of a challenge because I think he's right. I think that the word has been hollowed out. It doesn't mean anything anymore. So we set out to interview over the course of nearly 4 years, more than 300 like truly world-class disruptors, innovators, leaders of transformation projects, and ask them one simple question, which is, don't tell me what the strategy is, don't give me the PowerPoint deck, just tell me what you did. And that ultimately led to the book. But it also led us to really rethink disruption and develop a different, I'm sure we'll get there, but develop a different model to think about disruption slightly differently, I think, than most of the people in the market do.
Okay. It makes a lot of sense, and we work with startups and entrepreneurs every day, and we do feel like that. Maybe we lost the meaning, the full meaning of disruption. And even when we consider AI, artificial intelligence, nowadays, we either feel that if you don't have AI is not disruptive, or everything that has AI is disruptive itself. And I know you talk a lot about AI. It's very interesting, your perspective on that. And it has been a hot topic. Remember ChatGPT for a few months, but not only. AI has been around us for quite a few decades. Do you feel that behind the hype, the sudden growth, especially because it's a mass situation right now, are we still at the beginning of what we can potentially achieve, or is it the middle or near the end? Where do we stand right now? Those weak points you always talk about, were them predicting these a few years ago, or are these the weak points that we need to confirm?
Yeah, so I wish I could answer the question of where are we actually with the world in the world of AI. I mean, honestly, I do think we are at the very beginning. I think that's pretty undebatable. Now, granted, we've been at this, and you mentioned this, like we've been at this AI thing for 40 plus years, so it's not new. And even the AI models we're currently seeing, you mentioned ChatGPT, so large language learning models, they've been around for a couple of years now, which gets us to an interesting point. I think the reason why people are currently waking up to it and why it feels like something new is happening literally every day, and granted, there's a lot happening in this space, but it feels like it came out of nowhere for a lot of us. If you look carefully, you could actually have seen all of this like 5 years ago, right? Like the first large language models, like the first versions of GPT, which weren't great, but they kind of hinted at what is possible. They've been around for a little while. I think the reason why it's taking off so much at the moment and why people are talking about it so much is until really very recently, only experts could use these systems. Only experts had access to these systems. You had to have big computers like supercomputers, and it was complicated. And now you have ChatGPT, where you simply can set up an account. It looks like the Google search engine. It has a little text box. You punch something in. And of course, the first thing people do is they ask, who am I, right? Who is Pascal Finette? And then they see ChatGPT isn't particularly good at fact finding. And then the next thing is they do something like, write me a love letter in the words of Shakespeare, and then they realize, oh my God, these systems are really good with language. So I think the reason why it feels just so incredible and why it tipped is because we made it accessible. Okay. And kudos to OpenAI for making it super easy.
Almost. It's almost user-friendly, right? Everybody can use it.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's also interesting because I think, if you're thinking about AI, and your profession clearly is one which already is using AI and will use AI way more in the future. I would make the argument that for you, it's still pretty complicated, because what you want to do is you don't want to have general AI. You want to have specialized AI. You want to have AI which is trained on law, the corpus of the law, probably trained on your client's documents, for example. And to create that, it's still more complicated. It's still not easy. So that's the reason why I think we're really only at the beginning, because there will be a moment when you will open a text editor, Word. And that text editor will be trained on the specifics of your business and your profession. And then it will become really interesting, because then you can ask it questions around, let's say, for example, you prepare the legal documents for one of your startups, you ingest all the information you have about this startup, and then it can help you do these tasks better.
We're actually developing a tool like that, integrating ChatGPT. We cannot, at the moment, get it so public because there's a data processing question there. So, but it's the beginning, at least for us and for legal, and we feel that it will improve a lot our efficiency and the capability to answer clients' needs, yes. And we expect that in healthcare, in many areas of today's world. So, but it's interesting to understand from your point of view that you consider it the beginning of everything, yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the interesting question I believe we need to ask ourselves is, so first of all, as you mentioned, these systems will get better when we make them more specific. So an AI which is specifically trained not only on the law, but on the law as you see it as a firm, right? And your clients. And I think the second part to that is, and we see the early glimpses of this already, is when we give these systems also some automation powers. So when we do allow these systems to actually do transactions on our behalf, and we start to see this where people use ChatGPT, for example, not only to plan a trip to Lisbon, for example, but then have ChatGPT go out into the internet, look up what's the cheapest airline, what's the best hotel to stay at, maybe make the reservation at the hotel. And that will become a very weird, very interesting world. By the way, also a lot of work for you as lawyers, I tell you that.
Yes, but quite impressive and unstoppable, I would say. Yes. But Yogi, you were saying?
Yes, of course, and you will agree with me because you're already introducing this topic. It's not only rainbows and sunshine when it comes to AI. So there's a lot of debate around the ethics of AI and whether some of their applications should be or not restricted. So I'd like to understand what your take on this issue and what guidelines should we use to make AI more responsibly used, more securely used, and more ethically used.
Yeah, I think this is of course a super hot topic, and you might have seen in Italy, pretty reactionary. They were like, "Oh, we're going to ban ChatGPT for a little while," which is just crazy as a move. But you understand where it comes from, and the challenge, of course, is that all of these systems, they're being trained on data, and the data inherently has bias. So something like, for example, racial bias, right? Because of a lot of the data is like predominantly, like even if you just think about like a corpus being predominantly written by people who look like me, white, male, it will have bias in it. So the systems then reinforce bias essentially. So we need to be very careful about the data sets we train these systems on, and how do we ensure that these systems be as unbiased as possible. Now, I do see some issues around the good old Silicon Valley mantra, like run fast, be fast, and break things while you're doing this. If you're thinking about a system like a ChatGPT, and it has safeguards, right? Like it does. If you try to do certain prompts, it will tell you that it will not respond to that prompt. The challenge with those safeguards is, though, that these safeguards are being put in by humans as rules. And one of the reasons why old rule-based AI systems never worked is because you can never ever make up enough rules. It's just too complicated for humans, right? You can't be extensive. And you know this from the law. Like the reason why you write the code of law in this slightly ambiguous way is because you say, well, you can't regulate every single use case, so you rather regulate the ethical behavior around this. So I think there's a really interesting challenge and a really interesting role, by the way, to play by people like you, lawyers and policymakers, to really figure out what are the guiding principles which we need to embed in the code to make sure that these systems are as unbiased and as fair as humanly possible.
Yes, I agree with you 100%. And I'm going to launch here another challenge is regarding the workforce. So we are witnessing a work shift that we're already seeing everywhere in every job. So I'll ask you this. Will humans be replaced by AI, or will humans using AI replace the ones who don't adapt? So should we fear the rise of the machines, or are we still okay?
I think it's a really interesting question. And the way I like to think about this is I think you want to separate the question to two segments. The one question is about the jobs or the professions of the future. And when you look at what is AI actually good at, you realize that the jobs most in danger are mid-level jobs. So they're not entry-level jobs. They're typically not manual labor jobs. So the classic example is an AI will very most likely, for the next 20, 30, 40 years, not replace a plumber. So if you're a plumber or carpenter, you're fine. What AI will do is it will change, for example, your profession, where you have a paralegal, 10 years ago, and already we don't do this all that much anymore, but like basically just go through paper, right? Like you have say you've got a trial case and you go through like oodles of paper to find the proverbial needle in the haystack. AI can do this better. So these jobs will change. Now, the good news about those jobs is that they are typically better educated workers. So we should be able actually to find new work for them. And that work will most likely be work which is being done in conjunction with AI. There's a Stanford study which literally just came out, which is probably the very first study which actually looked at the impact of AI on real workforce in the customer service industry by looking at a Fortune 500 company which used AI chatbots to enhance their customer service experience. And what they found is that productivity went up by about 16%, which is huge. Employee dissatisfaction, because customer support is a really hard job, went down. So people were happier in their jobs. And what they also saw is that overall, the productivity across the organization went up, just because you've got these like secondary and tertiary effects. So that's all good. I think that's amazing. The big challenge, though, is if you zoom out and you look at this societally, I think as a society, we currently have this issue that productivity gains tend to benefit the top, 5% of the population. They don't benefit the lower part of the population. And this has been a trend here in the US, for example, for like decades now. And so you've got this disparity between the rich and the poor essentially getting bigger and bigger. And that is a real problem. So we need to figure out how do we actually make sure that with all of those movements and trends, that we become a more even and equal society rather than a society which is splitting. And AI might accelerate this. So we need to be very careful with that, I think.
Yes, that's quite an interesting perspective from your side, and maybe a bit of decoding the future here, as you mentioned in your book. I'm curious and getting to the end of our conversation and speaking about AI. If future was a cake, is AI a piece of the cake or all the cake?
AI might be the. I'm tempted to say it's the icing, but it's actually not the icing on the cake. I think what it is it becomes the bottom layer of the cake.
Okay.
Right? I very fundamentally believe, and you see this, there's so many products today which are AI infused. And even if it's just stupid AI and it doesn't do a lot, but you can't watch a movie on Netflix which hasn't been recommended to you by an AI. You can't, use your watch if you use a smartwatch, and use a fitness program which doesn't give you some form of AI. You can't use, for Christ's sake, you can't even use a text editor which doesn't have some form of AI which does spell checking. And all this is pretty crude today. It's not particularly good, but it will get much, much better. So it becomes much more of a base layer. And then I'm tempted to say that human creativity and ingenuity, that's the icing on the cake.
Okay, it makes sense, and very excited to see what the future holds and what we can build with it. And that's it for today's episode of Business Building Blocks. We want to give a huge thank to Pascal for joining us and sharing your incredible insights on this topic. Any final remarks you would like to add, Pascal?
No, I would argue and encourage everybody just to become really curious about the future and see for yourself and try these things out. It's very easy to fall into the trap of, oh my God, Yuval Harari, the amazing author, just said like AI is taking over the world, we're doomed. Do yourself a favor, just like use these systems, see what their limitations are, understand what the boundaries are, understand that these systems are not almighty and will most likely never be almighty. Or at least in our lifetime. So really become curious and try these things out. And kudos for you to run internal projects and bringing ChatGPT into your profession, because I truly think that is the future.
I agree, and let's take your advice to heart and be radical and curious in our thinking and bold in our actions, even with AI, but not considering them the almighty, of course. Thank you. Join us next time as we continue to explore the business building blocks that will help you succeed within the changes that today's world bring. Until then, keep innovating, keep dreaming, and keep building. Thank you. Thank you, Pascal.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.